Hey viewers, I was going to review Power Armor mods or Grass mods this week, but then Fallout London came out on Thursday, giving me the easiest choice in the world. I could stare at blades of grass for hours, or try out a massive unofficial Fallout game. Needless to say, I picked the latter option and had an absolute blast. Fallout London is an incredible achievement. It's almost unbelievable that it even exists and is as good as it is. It's a miracle. In just 5 years, a team of volunteers managed to create a total conversion with a bigger world, more quests, more weapons, and more dialogue than the professionally made Fallout 4. This is another one of those times I wish I could just freeze time for everybody else and play the mod for 200 hours and write a detailed review, because I've only been able to play for 15 hours and that feels like a drop in the bucket. I feel like I've just gotten started, especially since survival mode is really slowing me down. So, no need to worry about spoilers from me, since I haven't even played enough to be able to spoil anything important. At least I can talk about what I have seen so far, and let's start off with the good. The art style is absolutely beautiful. A lot of familiar objects have been recreated in the old Fallout 3 style. You'll instantly recognize the fire hose boxes, desks, and old Nuka-Cola bottle design. The terminals now look like old Amiga computers, the weapons are retro-futuristic British guns like you'd expect. It's just wonderful. The world is gorgeous, and it's not all urban sprawl. There's plenty of open park and grassland areas too. There's a surprising amount of dense vegetation growing in between London's brick and concrete, especially in the starting areas of the map. Every borough has its own thing going on though. I haven't been to them all yet, but from what I've seen, there's even more variety than you'll find in the Commonwealth. There's a lot of verticality too, just like downtown Boston. The world space is definitely a huge positive point. It would be impressive on its own even without any NPCs or quests to populate it. I feel like I could explore this map for 500 hours and still find new areas or collectibles strewn about. The full-on team has successfully created that new Bethesda game feeling where it's just you and this massive open world you're going to spend the next few months in. The number of factions puts vanilla Fallout 4 to shame, and I haven't even met half of them yet. I've only done a bit of the Vagabonds and Thames Haven quests, and barely started the main quest. If the rest of the quest content is as high quality as what I've seen so far, I'm in for a treat. Many of the quests, at least the ones I encountered early on with the Vagabonds, are just fetch this, fetch that, but considering how much I want to explore this world anyways, I don't mind being sent out to grab MacGuffins. I found it surprising that quests sometimes don't point out exactly where you need to go, requiring you to figure out things for yourself a little. Team Folan has proven that Fallout can work outside of an American setting. Their post-apocalyptic London is as chock full of British culture as the mainline Fallout games are of Americana. I've spotted all sorts of cultural references, and probably didn't spot 3 times as many since I know precious little about British culture. I can't speak to how well any new lore fits with established Fallout canon because, once again, I've barely scratched the surface of it. After 15 hours, the world of Fallout London is still mostly an unknown to me, but I certainly didn't see anything completely insane or out of pocket yet. The Thames folk are the weirdest thing I've found so far, and I don't mind their inclusion as a new type of humanoid mutant, especially because there's no super mutants in London as far as I'm aware. Voice acting is excellent in general. There's even some celebrity talent lending performances. There's a few generic NPCs that sound less good, but that's easily forgivable considering it's a volunteer project, and I doubt most of the actors had an expensive recording setup or proper direction. Level design is good, at least for the dungeons I've been to. I mean, it's at least as good as the vanilla game, and there's probably nearly as many dungeons to explore, so I'm satisfied. I like the ambient soundtrack, and I'm sure the radio is great too. I haven't listened to it yet because I want to use all this footage and I'm always worried about copyright strikes and stuff. I've run out of good things to say, so I'll move on to the bad. This section is going to be a lot longer, but don't leave with the impression I hate this mod. I'm loving it, but I always find it easier to come up with things I dislike than what I like. I'm just a negative Nancy. First off, I'm sure the install process is a bit of a pain in the ass for the average user. I had already downgraded my game with the simple Fallout 4 downgrader, and I found it easy to copy the data folder from Fallout London's install path and load it as a mod using Mod Organizer 2. Copying the innies was also very simple, but for the average person, that's way too many steps. Some of them are guaranteed to screw it up. It's not really Team Folan's fault though, it's Bethesda's next-gen update that dashed their dreams of having a simple one-click install. Their decision to delay release makes perfect sense in hindsight now that thousands of people are having problems with downgrading their games or getting the mod installed. A lot of people are having crashing problems, and I was having crashes every hour or so as well, even with Buffout 4, until I disabled Buffout 4's memory manager and used Bacca scrap heaps instead. That sorted out my crashing issues for the last 4 hours of gameplay, although I can't be 100% certain they're eliminated for good. Extremely long loading times are a staple of Fallout 4. It doesn't matter how fast your CPU and SSD are, it always takes forever, and Fallout London's load times are even worse. They can be over a minute long. Long loading times fix and disk cache enabler are absolutely essential. Combined, they reduced my loading times to always under 10 seconds and often only 2 or 3 seconds. I found it was necessary to set B quick load to false in long loading times fixes ini, or else textures wouldn't fully load sometimes, however. I encountered a bit of Z-fighting here and there, there's some culling errors, and there's a few clutter models that clip into the environment or have missing faces, but have you seen vanilla Fallout 4? It has way worse visual problems. In general, the London world space is more visually polished than the Commonwealth, of that I have no doubt. Performance is quite bad. Seeing how detailed and built up the map is, I expected low CPU limited frame rates, but some areas are almost unbelievable. Take the exit of St. Alpheg's Church, for example, which gives me about 90 FPS on a 7800 X3D with 10,000 shadow distance, which is about 35% worse than the absolute worst view I can find in the Commonwealth's Corvega factory. Reducing shadow distance to practically nothing can claw me back to 140 to 150 FPS, but it's a huge cut to make. Sadly, reducing shadow distance is the only thing that's going to help you when you're CPU limited. The Shadow Boost mod will be your best friend when playing Fallout London. Either that, or lowering the shadow distance manually through the launcher or ini files. I seriously hope patches will arrive to improve performance because on lower end, hell, even mid-range CPUs, the frame rate will be dropping into the 30s and 40s sometimes. If you can stomach the extra input lag, I can't. Frame generation solutions like lossless scaling FrameGen could be helpful, but you have to pay for it and deal with the artifacts it introduces. On the GPU side of things, highly vegetated areas are surprisingly intensive, definitely far more so than vanilla Fallout 4. Again, I'd say it's often 20 to 30% worse, although that's just my estimate based on how it feels. My pitiful RTX 4060 is not enough for a locked 60 FPS on the default ultra settings at 1440p. It drops into the 50s and even high 40s at worst. However, there's a lot more you can do here. Disabling God Rays and reducing the shadow map resolution would be my first step. If that's not enough, you can try turning off ambient occlusion, reducing grass draw distance or density, using lossless scaling. There's plenty of tweaks to play with. I would recommend against Pure Dark's upscaler since it gave me a bug where the entire screen would freeze when zooming in while using Hero, Fallout London's jet replacement. Speaking of bugs, my experience was far from bug-free. There's the expected issues I've always had with Fallout 4, plants swaying in the wind at 1,000,000 miles an hour, quest NPCs refusing to talk with me until I run away and back to them again, but I also ran into an unvoiced cannibal NPC, who promptly killed me. Once my view got stuck and I was only capable of looking side to side, not up and down, and playing Fallout 4 with the restrictions of Doom was not pleasant. Thankfully, sitting in a chair fixes that problem. I had one potentially safe ending bug in the old Royal Navy College. The exit door's activator didn't show up unless I clipped straight through the door. If I didn't have access to the console, I'd have been soft-locked. Another problem I had was the absolutely crushing difficulty, although I kind of brought it on myself by trying to do my first playthrough in survival mode. Still, it was almost absurdly difficult. You get a 10% malice to damage dealt and received right at the beginning, which really doesn't help matters, and unlike regular Fallout 4, you don't have access to a workshop area right away. In fact, after 15 hours, I still don't have a workshop, I just have to leave my excess loot at the Vagabond's bar. The weapons you start with are terrible. The crude guns that replace vanilla pipe guns are infuriatingly inaccurate and do very little damage, unless they're in the enemy's hands, of course. If so, you'll be dead in 1 or 2 shots. Most water is ridiculously radioactive, it kills you in 5 seconds flat. Beds are few and far between, and when you're just starting out, you obviously won't know where to find them. I could deal with all that if I just had a decent amount of health, but something must be wrong with the health scaling or something because everything was killing me in 1 or 2 hits, even the puniest enemies. Eventually, I installed game configuration menu and set my incoming damage to 1, and changing that one simple game setting totally transformed my experience. Instead of being utterly impossible, combat became tough but fair. I also used sleep or save to make things a bit easier and add the save-o drug for when I couldn't find a bed. With those changes, I can actually recommend a survival mode, but you're probably best served saving it for a second playthrough. So those are my thoughts after 15 hours. The mod started off kind of rocky for me with crashing, bad performance, and difficulty issues, but now that I've worked through all that, I'm really starting to enjoy the mod. Everyone who worked on it should pat themselves on the back, they did an amazing job. I can't wait to get right back into it for another 200 hours, but that's all from me this week. Next time around, I'll try to be a little less lazy and actually review something properly. Till then, toodles!